All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are digging into a real head-scratcher, a total physics mystery. We're going to use the source documents to try and figure out how a craft could possibly go from the vacuum of space all the way down into the deep ocean and not even make a splash. Sounds impossible, right? So let's just jump right in. We're starting with a question that sounds like a physics riddle. How do you survive hitting a concrete wall at Mach 5? I mean, we're talking over 3,800 miles an hour. You hit a solid wall at that speed, game over, right? Well, the answer suggested by the source material, it's going to sound like pure science fiction. But stick with me, because it's supposedly grounded in some very specific, very advanced physics. The answer is, you vaporize the wall before you ever hit it. See, it's not about being tougher. It's about changing the rules of the game entirely. Okay, so to really get our heads around that wild solution, we first have to understand just how violent this problem is. And when you're talking about a hypersonic craft, the biggest, hardest wall it could ever hit isn't made of concrete. It's the ocean. The first thing you gotta understand is a super basic fact of physics. Air and saltwater, they're not created equal. They're just fundamentally different places to be, and it all comes down to one crucial thing: density. Yeah, look at that number. Saltwater is almost 800 times denser than air. And that's not just some trivia fact, okay? That is a gigantic difference. It has absolutely catastrophic implications if you try to go from one to the other at incredible speeds. So here's the bottom line. When you're moving at hypersonic speeds, we're talking Mach 5+, the water molecules literally can't get out of the way fast enough. They just can't. The surface of the ocean stops behaving like a liquid, and for all intents and purposes, it becomes a solid wall. The impact creates a hydrodynamic shock that is pretty much identical to hitting concrete. And the result? You're pulverized. Instantly. And yet, we have witnessed reports, right? Like the famous 2004 Nimitz encounter. And they describe something that just completely breaks this rule. So how is that possible? Well, according to the source material, the answer, the real clue, is hidden in a really, really weird detail. So Commander David Fravor, the FA-18 pilot, he gets on scene, and the very first thing he sees is this cross of white water. He said it was huge, about the size of a 737, and it was just churning, boiling, on a sea that was otherwise perfectly calm, like glass. And get this, he saw this before he even spotted the famous Tic Tac craft hovering right over it. Now, this is super important. That churning water wasn't just some weird thing happening on the surface. The USS Princeton, a high-tech guided missile cruiser, had already been tracking something submerged on its advanced radar. The pilots weren't sent out to look for something in the air. They were sent to check out an anomaly that was already under the waves. So, what in the world could boil the ocean from below on a perfectly calm day? I mean, this clearly wasn't the wake from a boat or something normal. The source material points to this boiling anomaly as the key. It's the telltale sign, the thermal signature, of some kind of radical new physics at work. All right, so let's get to the explanation the source provides. It's a heck of a term: electromagnetic supercavitation. But what it really is a proposed way to get around that concrete wall problem altogether. And here's the absolute core of the idea. You don't build a craft that's tough enough to survive the impact. No. Instead, you use intense microwave energy to flash boil the water into a giant bubble of steam. This bubble forms just milliseconds before you get there, creating a pocket, a tunnel of gas, that the craft just slips right through. It never even touches the liquid. And how does it do this? Well, according to the source, there's no traditional engine here. It points to a U.S. Navy patent, US 1044-532B2, and the concepts within it. The idea is that the craft's entire hull basically is the engine. It functions as a resonant microwave cavity, pumping out literally gigawatts of power. We're talking the output of a nuclear power plant, all focused on vaporizing the water in front of it. So let's just walk through it. First, this gigawatt microwave field projects out in front of the craft. 2, the seawater in its path is instantly flash-boiled. 3, a bubble of superheated steam and plasma forms. And 4, the craft just zips right through that bubble. No splash, no impact, nothing. It's not about being strong, it's about being smart enough to just erase the problem. Okay, well, what happens once it's underwater? Well, that steam bubble doesn't just pop, it's maintained around the craft. And this is where things get really wild. It gives the vehicle a set of what the source calls impossible tactical advantages. You have to get this. The craft isn't swimming through the ocean. It's flying through the ocean, but inside its own personal bubble of atmosphere. This is so critical. All that crushing deep sea pressure, the insane drag that slows down our best submarines, it's all irrelevant. To this craft, flying through the Mariana Trench is exactly the same as flying through the upper atmosphere.
And this leads to some mind-blowing advantages. First, zero hydrodynamic drag. That means it could fly at hundreds, maybe thousands of knots underwater. Second, it's an acoustic cloak. The steam bubble isolates all sound, making it almost perfectly silent. And third, the thermal anomaly. That boiling wake is the exact phenomenon Commander Fravor saw. It's the only real clue that it's even there.
Now, this all sounds pretty out there, I know, but the source material tries to bring it back to Earth by pointing to what it calls forensic evidence that's hiding in plain sight, the public patent record. The suggestion is that this isn't just theory. Check this out. This is a real U.S. Navy patent. The assignee is literally the Secretary of the Navy. And what does it describe? A method for using powerful electromagnetic fields to control the flow of a conductive fluid, like salt water, around a hull. The whole point is to dramatically reduce drag and noise. Sound familiar? But here is the real kicker, the timing. On February 3rd, 2004, the Navy gets this patent for electromagnetic fluid control. Then, on November 14th of the exact same year, the USS Nimitz strike group has its famous encounter with the Tic Tac, a craft that seems to be demonstrating these exact capabilities just on a whole other level. That's a pretty wild coincidence, isn't it? So the big takeaway here is that this proposes a completely different way of looking at the problem. The Tic Tac, if this theory is right, doesn't defy the laws of hydrodynamics. It just vaporizes them. The puzzle was never how do you survive hitting the wall. The real puzzle was how do you make the wall disappear? And that leaves us with one last, pretty provocative question to chew on. If the source material is correct and the ocean can be turned into a frictionless highway, where exactly does that highway lead? Just something to think about. Thanks for joining me for this breakdown.